Pipelines. Millions and millions of miles of pipelines crisscross the United States. These pipelines transport large quantities of commodities that serve a number of our everyday needs, such as transportation, heating our homes, manufacturing, and agriculture.
Line 5 transports both natural gas liquids and light crude oil. Natural gas liquids get refined into propane to heat homes. So throughout northern Michigan and the Upper Peninsula, 85 out of every 100 houses that uses propane to heat their home comes from the natural gas liquids on Line 5. The light crude oil then goes downstate near the Port Huron, Detroit area, and when it exits Line 5, it goes to feed the refineries in the Detroit area. Approximately 30% of all light crude oil on Line 5 stays right here in Michigan.
Pipelines are considered to be one of the safest and most efficient means of transporting commodities used to power our homes and businesses. However, they do come with risks. Pipeline accidents can and do happen. When they do, the results are often catastrophic. The consequences of a pipeline oil spill can be disastrous when they occur in our rivers, streams, lakes, or oceans.
The important thing for us to all keep our eyes on is that the potential impact of a pipeline break in northern Michigan could be severe because of all of the sensitive ecosystems and the large number of rivers and lakes and water bodies in northern Michigan. So I think that's what we really need to be thinking about.
Michigan is at great risk from a pipeline spill. After all, water is Michigan's most significant resource. The Great Lakes and inland waters shape our state, our lives, and our economy. The Great Lakes contain 1/5 of the world's fresh surface water and provide drinking water to over 40 million people. Michigan is home to more than 11,000 inland lakes, 36,000 miles of rivers and streams, 5.5 million acres of wetlands, and 3,200 miles of shoreline. But Michigan is also home to over 123,000 miles of pipeline. Between 2004 and 2013, there were 116 reported incidents on pipelines in Michigan. This included the July 26, 2010 pipeline rupture that released an estimated 843,000 gallons of crude oil into the Talmadge Creek and the Kalamazoo River, a Lake Michigan tributary. This served as a wake-up call for us all, a reminder of the risks pipelines can pose. A pipeline rupture could be particularly devastating in northern Michigan. A pipeline rupture here could contaminate surface and drinking water, harm wildlife, cause significant property damage, and foul our tourism economy. The pipeline infrastructure across the country is aging. Over 50% of the nation's pipelines were constructed in the 1950s and 1960s. Some pipelines were built even earlier. The oldest hazardous liquid pipeline still in operation in Michigan was installed during the 1930s. While aging infrastructure is a problem, age alone does not fully indicate the risk of a pipeline rupture. Factors such as the type of materials used, installation techniques, seam type, whether corrosion prevention measures were used, and how the pipeline is maintained all impact the likelihood that a rupture could occur.
Pipelines have extraordinarily long lives. What you have to look at when determining the longevity or the lifespan of a pipeline are many factors. The type of environment it sits in, the type of product that it carries, the maintenance records and maintenance history of the line. All of those things combined will help determine how long a pipeline is fit for service.
The majority of pipeline infrastructure in Michigan is located in the Detroit metro area, in Wayne and Oakland counties. There is only a small percentage of pipelines in northern Michigan. In fact, there are only 2 major crude oil pipelines. One is owned and operated by Enbridge Energy Limited Partnership, and the other by MarkWest Energy Partners. There are two main categories of fuel pipelines: hazardous liquid and natural gas. Hazardous liquid pipelines are those that transport crude oil, including refined petroleum products such as diesel, gasoline, jet fuel, and home heating oil, carbon dioxide and hydrous ammonia, and natural gas liquids, which is butane, ethane, and propane. Natural gas pipelines transport natural gas, which is primarily methane. The majority of pipelines throughout the country are natural gas lines. Only 7% of the total pipeline mileage is used to transport hazardous liquids. Approximately 5% of the pipelines in Michigan transport hazardous liquids.
We currently don't have any heavy oils passing through our area of responsibility, so that's an advantage, which is not to say that even light oils won't sink. They will eventually over time.
Line 5 is a 645-mile petroleum pipeline owned and operated by Enbridge Energy Limited Partnership. The line became operational in 1953 and carries approximately 540,000 barrels or 22.7 million gallons of light crude oil, synthetic crude, and natural gas liquids per day. Line 5 runs from Superior, Wisconsin, across Michigan's Upper Peninsula, through northern Michigan, down to the Thumb region, and over to Sarnia, Ontario. Line 5 most notably crosses the 4.6-mile stretch of the Straits of Mackinac, as well as under multiple rivers and streams, goes through miles of wetlands, and runs right next to many of our sparkling inland lakes. In northern Michigan, Line 5 crosses the Indian River, Little Sturgeon River, Pigeon River, and Upper Black River, and traverses within a few miles or less from French Farm Lake, Twin Lake, Paradise Lake, Mud Lake, Monroe Lake, Mullet Lake, Douglas Lake, and Burt Lake. It is the responsibility of pipeline operators to take measures to minimize the risks associated with transportation of oil and gas through pipelines. Operators can help prevent an oil spill by using proper construction materials and techniques, along with monitoring, maintenance, and inspection practices. Ensuring pipeline integrity starts with proper pipeline design and construction. Line 5 is 30 inches in diameter except when it crosses the Straits of Mackinac, where it divides into two 20-inch diameter pipes. The 20-inch diameter pipes in the Straits of Mackinac have a wall thickness of 0.812 inches. The rest of the Line 5 has a minimum wall thickness ranging between 0.312 and 0.50 inches. Line 5 was constructed of steel and was installed with corrosion protection measures, including a coal tar enamel coating on the outside of the pipeline, as well as cathodic protection. Cathodic protection is a technology that uses direct electrical current to counteract the normal external corrosion of a metal pipeline.
The pipeline itself, in many places, including at the Straits, is more than 60 years old. However, what makes the line work, what makes the oil and the natural gas liquid flow through the line, are the mechanical pieces, like pumps. And you've got valves and other fittings. Those mechanical pieces do and will break down over time, so they need to be regularly maintained and replaced. And those are the pieces of the pipeline system that do get replaced on a regular, recurring basis.
Monitoring of pipelines is key for early detection of problems. Line 5 is monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from a remote control center. Enbridge conducts aerial and ground surveys along the pipeline right-of-way at least 26 times a year and more if warranted. They also compare the volume of oil injected into the line with the volume of oil delivered to identify any loss of oil, which could indicate a leak. Unfortunately, even the most sophisticated leak detection system is not foolproof. Small leaks can go undetected for long periods because they do not trip pressure and flow alarms. Enbridge also inspects pipelines to identify changes that could threaten the integrity of the pipeline.
On the inside of the pipe, though, regardless of if it's inland or underwater, we have different types of inspection tools that take thousands of computer images of the inside of the pipe and are looking for any sort of an abnormality. It's through all of those mechanisms, inside and outside of the pipe, that we maintain its integrity. And at the Straits of Mackinac, where it is unique, we have dive teams that go down and visually inspect the line every other year. The dive teams then are complemented by now two types of underwater vehicles. We have a remote controlled underwater vehicle and an underwater autonomous vehicle that we have through a partnership now with Michigan Tech University. Collectively, they're looking for such things as any damage to the coating, damage to the pipe. They look for any debris that may be sitting on the pipe or adjacent to it. They're also looking at currents and flows, and they're checking to see what the span distances are between our supports. And likewise, they're actually checking each and every support that we have in place to see if there's been any difference over the last couple of years.
Waterway crossings are significant and important because not only are they sensitive in and of themselves, but they provide a conduit, obviously, for oil to impact other areas much more quickly than if the oil spilled in a landlocked situation.
The Northern Michigan Area Committee has looked at that pipeline. We've rated at a low probability for a break, but a very high consequence. So it gives it a pretty high number. We look at all areas where the pipeline could impact Lake Michigan. From Manistee, Michigan to St. Ignace, Michigan, we have roughly a 90-mile stretch of pipeline that runs in very close proximity to Lake Michigan, which is also of concern for us. The biggest concern is we don't have enough resources in the area to respond promptly to a spill.
Emergency response planning is a critical component of pipeline operations. It allows pipeline operators and spill responders to establish practices and procedures to manage emergency situations that mitigate the environmental impacts of a spill.
All incidents begin locally and end locally, so it's really important to have local involvement from public officials, from non-governmental organizations such as yours, from Indian tribes, and involved in that planning process and all the other phases of that planning process.
Response readiness goes beyond equipment. Personnel must be trained to react quickly and efficiently in the event of an oil spill. To achieve this, drills and simulations are regularly conducted by Enbridge in coordination with federal, state, and tribal government representatives, as well as the local community members.
We develop scenarios. We go through the entire planning process. We go out and we exercise that scenario. We identify what does, and more importantly, what doesn't work. Because when we identify what doesn't work, we go back into that plan, we make that improvement, we identify that gap, and we fix that gap, and then we continue the cycle over and over again. So it's a non-stop, continuous cycle of identifying potential scenarios, weighing the risk, planning the exercise, conducting the exercise, fixing the gaps, and starting the whole cycle over again.
The severity of impact of an oil spill depends on a variety of factors, including physical characteristics of the oil and environmental conditions, such as water temperature and weather.
With any oil, whether it's a light oil or even a fuel such as gasoline, as it's released, it will begin to undergo what we call weathering. And weathering results from the action of wind and sunlight and waves and turbulence and mixing with sand and mixing with organic materials in the water column. And as that weathering process occurs, oil increasingly tends to sink, or most oils will have a tendency or become much more likely to sink. So it's a factor of the type of oil to begin with, and then how much weathering it undergoes. That's why it's so important in an oil spill scenario to get organized quickly and to recover oil as quickly as possible, because you're racing against the clock to get it before it begins to sink, because it's so much more difficult to not only clean up oil that has sunk, but to locate it, to find it, and to map out where it is and to plan how to get it, because you're basically working in the dark. If you can't find it, you can't clean it up. So if it's a floating oil, the types of measures would include the use of what we call booms, which are containment devices designed to corral or to prevent oil from moving further downstream. And when it's contained by those booms, then it is usually recovered by using vacuum techniques like large vacuum trucks, or by skimming techniques, which skim the oil off the surface of the water, and then it's collected by putting it into vessels, and then it's hauled away.
When an oil spill first occurs, a response is initiated by the company responsible for the release, oil spill response organizations, which are emergency response contractors, and local first responders. If the spill is large, state, tribal, and national personnel are called in to help contain the spill, clean it up, and minimize damage to the environment and human health. There are several methods that can be used to clean up oil, depending on the type and amount of oil spilled and the environmental conditions. Ultimately, the company responsible for the oil spill has legal liability for all expenses related to contaminant and cleanup of oil spills, as well as any damages resulting from the spill.
The role of the Coast Guard is to get on scene and to oversee the spill management. I think there's a misconception in a lot of cases. People think the Coast Guard does the cleanup of the spill, and that's not necessarily true. Our job as the federal line scene coordinators to show up and make sure the responsible party is indeed being a responsible party in cleaning up the spill. The key is to get on scene as quickly as possible and to get the contractors on scene as quickly as possible to try to recover as much of that product as possible. It's still on the surface. And also to try to keep that product from reaching the shoreline. It's much more difficult to recover the oil once it makes contact with the shoreline than it is in open water. So in any spill situation, time is of the essence, getting there as quickly as possible. What we can really do is A, beef up our resources, not just in the Straits of Mackinac, but let's focus on this other 90-mile stretch where we might also have a spill. Let's pre-position equipment along that area as well. We need more trained responders to be in the area. And there's some other things we can do too. We can leverage volunteers. We want help, we want volunteers, but what we also want is we want industry to reach out to these people in advance. Get them trained in hazardous chemical response. Give them in pre-position protective equipment so they can have the proper equipment, the proper training, so we can leverage those volunteers and have them do useful things to help us in the event of a spill. Because the more we have, that more people we have that are trained, the better off we're going to be.
One of the best ways to protect yourself and your family if you live near a pipeline is learn how to become the eyes and ears on the ground to help protect the pipeline from damage. This means not only behaving responsibly yourself on and near the pipeline easement, but also making sure that when you see something happening that might damage the pipeline or notice anything that indicates a problem with the pipeline, that you contact the pipeline operator. One of the leading causes of pipeline incidents is third-party damage, often by a contractor, landscaper, or homeowner. Before you plant a tree, add a fence, or conduct any excavation on your property for any reason, call 811. It's the law. 811 is a free national service created to help protect home and business owners from unintentionally damaging underground utility lines while digging. The one-call system coordinates with pipeline companies to mark the location of underground lines before you dig. Signs of a potential leak include strong petroleum scent or other pungent odor such as sulfur or rotten eggs if an odorant was added, dead vegetation, liquid or fire on the ground near the pipeline, dirt being thrown into the air, fire or a dense white cloud or fog, hissing, gurgling, or roaring sounds. Pipeline markers are placed along the pipeline route to identify the general location of a pipeline. They are found where a pipeline intersects a street, highway, railway, waterway, or other prominent points along the route. Markers can vary in size, shape, and color, but all markers include important information about the pipeline, including the product transported, the pipeline operator's name, and the operator's emergency contact number to report a pipeline problem.
I say this all the time. It's one team, one fight. We work as a team. Like I said, we have our federal agencies, we have our state agencies, we have our tribal partners, we have academia, we leverage industry and environmental groups and volunteers, and we ask and we try this as a Coast Guard. And when you have things like area committee meetings We want everyone to participate because we do not operate in a vacuum. And the more that we practice and the better we know one another and understand how we're going to operate, the better off we'll be in the event of a real spill.
As we continue to see increased growth in oil production in North America, more and more oil will be transported through the Great Lakes region. No method of transporting petroleum products can ever be completely safe, and transporting greater volumes of oil will only serve to increase the risk to the Great Lakes ecosystem. We are working towards a day when no crude oil is transported in, on, or under the Great Lakes. Until that day comes, the Watershed Council will continue to work on a variety of fronts, including prevention measures, emergency response planning, education and outreach, and policy changes. We are working to ensure the strongest possible protections are in place to preserve the heritage of northern Michigan, a tradition built around our magnificent waters. You can help. Stay informed and get engaged. Visit our website for more information on how you can help protect the Great Lakes and Michigan from an oil spill.